Let's open up the Black Series 6-inch figure of Paploo the Ewok from Return of the Jedi.
Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it.
Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. Over the past couple of weeks, quite a few of my local toy stores have been finally putting some of the older Star Wars figures on deep discount, like this one that was released back in 2023 for the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi. Now, normally I would not be opening up one of these beautiful anniversary replica Kenner backing cards, but this one is quite old now. I certainly gave local collectors a long while to pick this one up for their own collection. It has suffered a little bit of shop wear and a price sticker that, being there for over a year, now refuses to come off. So I think that this one is okay to open up, and as luck would have it, this one is my very first Black Series 6-inch scale Ewok to add to my collection. I do own quite a few pieces of Ewok merchandise, but not a Black Series figure, so I'm quite excited to check out the unique body and articulation of this particular figure. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll open this guy up and take a closer look at all of his details and articulation. But first, let's take one last look at the backing card. While Hasbro usually packages their Black Series 6-inch figures in windowed boxes, to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi, they released a wave on these replica backing cards, heavily inspired by the original Kenner backing cards for the 3.75-inch line of action figures from the 1970s and 80s. You can see the similarities of these two side by side. We have the Star Wars logo at the top, we have the Return of the Jedi logo in red also at the top, with a single chrome racetrack design around the film logo, and also a single chrome racetrack around the character art to the right hand side of the bubble. For the Black Series backing card, there is a really nice, quite high resolution image of an Ewok here, but this is the incorrect Ewok, which you can tell when you compare the image here with the actual packaged figure. They don't look anything alike. Now, that would be a slightly unusual mistake for modern Hasbro to make, but there is a reason for it. So I have an example over here of a Power of the Force vintage 1980s backing card here for the Romba Ewok. The image is different, but you can see that this is actually the same Ewok in terms of the hood and details for the outfit there. So this Ewok is actually a Romba. So why is it on this Paploo backing card? That is because the original Kenner backing card for Paploo also had this interesting mistake, where Kenner was the first one to actually put the wrong image of the wrong Ewok for the Paploo backing card there. Looking a little closer up at the Black Series figure right next to the backing card image, you can clearly see the differences between these two very different Ewoks. The fur color is different, the costume details are very different. They both do have belts and a staff weapon, but the hoods are very different in both color and details, and even a length and design there. For the rest of the backing card details, we have the yellow accent color for Paploo the Ewok, both in the nameplate at the top here with the black font reading Paploo, and also as the accent color in behind the figure. This particular figure just comes with the one accessory, that wooden staff with some fun details. So of course there's a lot of details on the figure itself. I like the other touches on this backing card, such as the Kenner logo on the front and the 40th anniversary logo here on the top left as well. Moving on to the back, again a lot of inspiration from the original Kenner backing cards with the all black design, the Star Wars logo here at the top with the double chrome racetrack, surrounding images of other figures from this assortment. There is a little bit of text here commemorating the 40th anniversary. Commemorate the 40th anniversary of Star Wars Return of the Jedi, with figures from the Black Series featuring classic design and packaging. The rest of it is just barcode, copyright text, all of that kind of stuff, and the commemoration text is repeated in a few different languages there. Overall, a really fun design. I wish that I'd been able to find this one without so much shopware damage and the sticker, because I would keep it completely sealed, but this one's going to be opened because I really just don't like that sticker there on the front, and I really do want to add a loose Black Series 6-inch Ewok figure to my display. So let's open this one up. So now I have Paploo out of the packaging, as well as his single staff accessory, so we can take a closer look. So as I quickly mentioned earlier, this is my first Black Series 6-inch Ewok figure, so the articulation is quite new to me. I had to work with his legs legs in particular to get him to stand up straight out of the backing card bubble. I got to there, but I'm really keen to see how well we can pose him, because he did seem to be quite particular about where he was going to stand up straight. The other thing that I really noticed when I got him off his backing card was just how sort of prickly he feels. Of course, Ewoks are fluffy with all of that fur, which is hard to translate well in plastic sometimes, but you can see it's got quite a textured surface here, which I gotta say actually has quite some fine points to it, and it has kind of a bit of a prickly surface to it. Of course, I'm not expecting plastic to be cute and cuddly and fluffy like an Ewok, but it was just a curious thing to sort of actually feel for the first time holding it in my hand. So let's go over the details. So we have a dark brown Ewok wearing a light sort of cream or beige color hood with some really nice feather details there. We have a plastic belt, which isn't actually fixed or sculpted onto the body. It's actually a separate piece. It looks like I might be able to sort of pull it off completely, but I'm not going to stress the plastic, but you can rotate it around. He's got this one knife detail on this side here, and a little bit of sort of just a little toggle here, sort of like a closure to his belt on the other side. It does a pretty good job of sort of nestling against his sort of hips there, just underneath this articulating point there. And there is some nice painted detail on sort of the knife section. So there is a sort of a sculpted knife here, but it's not actually, it's just all one piece that is not actually removable as a weapon there, which is kind of useful. Sometimes those very small accessories can be a pain, they get lost. But yeah, I quite like the fact that that is there and that I can move that around. Just so much easier, I guess, for Hasbro to sculpt all of this fur texture and then just have this over the top rather than trying to sculpt that all in one go. And I like that you can sort of move that little knife section to sort of be around the front, so he can perhaps rest his hand on the hilt or sort of move it around to the back if you want it sort of a little bit more tucked out of the way for poses holding his staff weapon there. It looks like the hood is actually removable as well. It doesn't look like it's attached, but again, that's going to be quite a tough job. His ears do come out through the holes, so again, I'm not going to risk damaging the accessory pieces by just trying to see if I'm going to remove them, because I just wouldn't display my figure with them removed. But taking a closer look at the hood, this is really fun. It looks like little draped leather. There's a really nice texture here. We've got these tiny little sort of stitch details that are sculpted in. You can sort of see it quite well here in the back, where we've got a little bit of sort of a lace detail, a little bit of cord sort of lacing up, sort of gathering the back of his hood. Really nice flat folds here, and overall quite a nice little sort of subtle leather texture with some really nice draping. We've got again that little sort of cord detail right on the top, coming in from his sort of headdress detail, coming around to his ears. Really nice detail, and it fits so tightly around the face as well. I can't see all the way under to see if that fur texture goes all the way under the hood. I would imagine so, but I can't really see well. It does have a little bit of flex, but it's not that flexible that I can pull it all the way up without sort of, we don't have one of those sort of split seams up the sides. It's designed to be all sort of all in one piece. Really nice sculpting. This patch just caught my eye. All the sort of pulling of the leather with the little cord details. That's really nice. And of course, we do have some painted details here. We have sort of a solid object here, whether it's like a bone or a piece of a skull or something like that. And then we've got all of these little feathers and details coming off here. Again, the Ewoks do tend to use a lot of little bones and feathers in their headdresses and their staffs and sort of ceremonial gear. And this feather up here is quite nicely detailed, and it is just a little bit flexible, being made of the same plastic as the rest of the hood. I do like the sculpting detail on that one there as well. Just curved nicely, sort of folding back there. Really nice. Nice paintwork here. Just a tiny bit misaligned on the dark sort of feathery sections here, but the rest of the details do tend to match up pretty well with the sculpting details. It's a little hard to tell if that paint section there is supposed to be there. It kind of flows on further from the feather, but because it's all just kind of details there, it doesn't actually come across like a paint floor, if it is indeed not supposed to travel that far across there. But overall, really nice. I like just the overall sort of tight detail lines, the little cords and everything like that. Looks really cool. And of course, moving on to Paploo's face, we've got some tiny details in here. He is a dark colored Ewok, so his black eyes are a little bit hidden in there, but they do have a little bit of a gloss to them. Of course, the actual actors performing as Ewoks in the film would have had sort of lenses so that they could see out. Paploo was of course portrayed by Kenny Baker, the actor who also portrayed R2-D2. So that's kind of fun. And we've got just a tiny detail there for the nose, sort of the nostrils are black, and a little bit of painted detail for the lips and the teeth. It's all quite dark in there, but that looks really tidy. And we do have just tiny white little dots just kind of painted on those eyes, just to kind of give us like the sort of light reflection that often happens on those sort of glossy surfaces. So that's really nice. Looks all very tidy. Really nice. So overall, the rest of the Ewok, we've got the dark brown fur. We can see that from the ears running all the way down to the toes. Now the fingers and toes are painted differently. We've got a slightly more sort of mid brown, light brown color. You can sort of see that on the underside of the feet there a little bit, and also on the hands. And we also have the toenails and fingernails painted as well. So they all look painted pretty well. We've got 3 fingers on each hand. You can see the sculpting there with the fingernails, and then 3 toes on each foot as well with the toenails sculpted there. So that is pretty much the only sort of a different painting on the rest of the body. A little bit simple here, but if you look up really close, there is a really subtle, almost like a green tinted wash or a dry brush, it would probably be more accurate, down the front of the fur. You can kind of see it here on the thighs, and it's also down the arms. You can sort of see it catching on the articulation there, sort of showing up, and a little bit on the face as well. Turning over, it's not very evident, if at all, here on the back. This looks like just the glossy sort of brown plastic here in the back. I'm not seeing that accent color coming through here on the back. Just around the front, you can kind of see the tone shift a little bit on the legs, particular from sort of here, moving around to the front, where you can see that sort of texture coming in. I like that it gives a little bit more depth to the color of the fur. A little bit odd that it's not there on the back, but I have noticed that a little bit with some of these Star Wars figures from Hasbro. Sometimes the weathering, particularly on armored characters, looks really nice on the front, and then there's no weathering sort of metallic scratches or anything like that on the back of the figure. I know these figures are designed to be displayed facing forward, but clever people that do scenes and photography and dioramas, not all figures are going to be facing the front, so you do lose a little bit of that added detail on the back. And because of the complexity of the surface here, I am certainly not brave enough to try my hand at sort of adding any additional paint or texture detail myself, so I'm going to leave that as is. I really like the little painted details here on the sheath there. It's almost like a little bit of a leaf motif there. That's really quite nice. So simple paint work, but it works really well. It's just that one little patch there that I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to be looking up a few screenshots of Paploo to see if that is sort of supposed to be there, but then feathers and things like that, they move around a lot. I don't think even looking at screenshots are going to help me figure out if that feather is supposed to continue up there, but at least it's got sort of a curved top. It's probably just Hasbro's attempt at trying to paint a feather, which is a very thin, small, flat detail on the hood there. But overall, quite nice paint, at least with the shading sort of effect down the front. It's not a harsh line down the sides. It kind of fades off. So you could say maybe he's just a bit grubby down the front, fighting against the Empire in the forest, and a little bit cleaner there on the back. Because of course, Paploo is the mischievous Ewok that commandeers or steals, shall we say, a Imperial speeder bike and sort of zooms off, trying to draw with him some of the biker scouts in the area so that the rebels can make their way in. So perhaps he's just a little bit grubby from climbing onto the speeder bike. That could be a lot of fun there. I don't know if the articulation on this figure would necessarily fit on a speeder bike. Unfortunately, I don't own a Black Series scale speeder bike to try him on. They're very hard to come by here in New Zealand. So let's test out his articulation. This is going to be quite an adventure for me because some of it is completely hidden by his hood, and again, he's just very different. He's kind of got the same sort of markers. You know, we've got shoulders, elbows, hands, waist, hips, knees, ankles, but the proportions are very, very different. Because of course, I know that there are human performers inside all of the Ewoks, but their proportions are very different in terms of the articulation because they're wearing much wider padded fursuits in the film and just quite different proportions to a standard Black Series figure. So I'm not sure how well I'm going to be able to turn the head, because every time I sort of try and turn him, he's turning at the waist instead. And to be honest, I don't actually know. I can just kind of see, it's very dark in there. I can just kind of see the articulation for the head. So if I hold his torso, I can move his head around, but the hood is really sort of going to stop. I'm getting a little bit of side to side, but it's not a lot because the hood is really stopping, especially here. That's just completely sort of butting up against his arms there. A little bit backwards and forwards as well. But again, the hood is a big restraint here, but I don't think Ewoks, they don't kind of look right almost without their iconic hood, so I'll take that. I do tend to favor the side of accuracy over freedom of movement when it comes to Black Series figures. So I can swivel his arms out to the front, but they are going to stop pretty high, so I can get them to about there. That's about where it is. I can't swing them up. We'll go out to the side a little bit. This one's possibly going to come out more to the side than the other because we've got a little bit of a gap here. Not the greatest. he's moving, but it's not doing a lot. I think he's going to have more movement at his elbows. So this guy's been in his packaging for a while, so I'm going to be a bit gentle with his stiff joints. Going to make sure I'm rotating his arms in the right way. Everything's just a little bit harder to spot where the articulation is moving because of his very short limbs there. So moving at the elbows, the articulation is pretty well done. It hides well. I know when it comes to the sort of the furry characters like Ewoks and Wookiees, it can be really hard trying to sort of disguise the movement points in amongst the fur. The fur is supposed to be all sort of continuous, so it can be hard to kind of get that sculpting sort of breaks in there. But honestly, I don't think that's too bad. I was a little worried that it might look quite clunky at the joins when I try and move him beyond his sort of default position as he was on the backing card. You do see the plastic articulation because it has to be smooth rather than textured like the rest of the fur, but the dark color does a pretty good job of hiding it. And especially if you start moving the elbows, you can hide those joints pretty well. He can rotate at those joints, at the hands. Just having a quick look, he might have a rocker. I don't know. I think his hands are too small to rock either side to side or back to front. I think they just rotate there. There's a little, oh, he might have, that one might have a little bit of a rocker to it. It's kind of hard to say whether it's side to side because their hands are kind of like this, kind of in like a circle. But there is a bit of movement there. It's a little hard to see where this one is, just because I can just make that out in there. It's really dark in there. I can just make out the rocker. So there is a side-to-side rocker here as well. I was not expecting that. I thought the hands were so small. We might not get that. Rotation might be all that we get. And of course we have very different sort of hand positions. We've only got 3 fingers. They're sort of larger. So I'm hoping that those are going to grip around his staff well. We'll try some different poses out later. I'm hoping I can get him into a 2-handed pose with his spear kind of across the body. That'll be fun. Moving on to his torso, if I pull that hood up, you can see the body there. So this is the main mid-torso articulation just above where the belt is going to sit, and because when I was trying to turn his head, I could already tell that he spins really nice at that waist, very nice and free, and because of the way that the sort of fur sculpts, he looks fine turning in different directions. Sometimes with human characters, when you turn them to the side, their shirts and their pants, they just start looking odd. You know that they wouldn't twist like that, but because the fur is so sort of uniform all the way around, you can turn him to the side and it doesn't look odd, which is really quite fun. Now, in terms of front and back, he does lean back a little bit. You can kind of see where the fur goes in underneath that upper section. It's kind of going a little bit flatter, but that is actually more than I was expecting. You can kind of see, if I tip him there, tip him forward, there's a little bit there, and he actually holds it reasonably well. He's not sort of snapping back, a little bit more towards the back than to the front. I think he's just got too much fur sculpting there at the front to come around too much there in the front, but that's actually reasonable, and I really like how smoothly he turns there in the waist. Now the thighs. Okay, so we can get his legs going out to the side. We can see the articulation style there in between the legs, and his legs actually move reasonably well. So he's not going to be, you know, sitting in a cockpit. That's about as far forward at the hips that I can get him. They're just completely stopping there because he's got just thicker thighs here. To the back, I can actually go a little bit further to the back. That's not actually too bad. Kind of looks like he's sprinting away there. That's quite nice. Actually, a lot more freedom in the thighs than I was expecting. Can get all the way out to the side. Not so much to the front, but yeah, good freedom to the back, which is kind of nice. So let's test out his knees. This is probably when his hips are going to start moving a little bit more freer. So quite tight in the knees, and I don't think we're going to get very deep in the movement there, just because we've got much sort of thicker sort of fur sculpting in the back here. That is completely hitting. I'm not really going to be bending his knees much further than that. Sort of pull him up a little bit, you can kind of see just how sort of bent I can get him, and it does show that articulation there in the front with a slightly different, darker plastic, which is something I'm not particularly fond of. I like the exposed articulation to at least be the same color as the rest of the plastic or matching somewhere, so it kind of blends in a little bit better. That is quite dark, and that's really standing out. So I'm probably going to try and articulate him in a position where that is going to be hiding the most. And I think that that's probably going to be a lot of people's sort of preferred Ewok position, to try and have them posed so that their fur does look fairly continuous. You can kind of see the cutouts there in the back. Again, if it's hiding in the back, it's a little bit easier to deal with. Moving on to the feet. Now, I'm not sure how much movement we're going to get here. These are actually quite prickly. It's making little sharp little indents in my hands as I'm trying to work with the articulation here. His feet are not going to go back. They are just completely hitting here in the front and a little bit to the front, but you can kind of see it's not a lot of movement there, but we do have that. It's a little bit easier to actually rock him side to side there as well. So all of the kind of articulation there in the feet that we would expect from a standard Black Series sort of humanoid figure, just a little bit limited on the range there, which I guess is the sort of takeaway from the articulation of the whole figure. We have all of the same sort of points of articulation, even the rockers in the wrists, but just a little bit more limited in the range of movement, which is quite fitting for an Ewok. Of course, we don't see them being terribly acrobatic, and yeah, I'm hoping that he's going to be a little bit more balanced once I sort of play around with his articulating points there, because he was quite a little bit wobbly when I got him out of the backing card. So let's take a closer look at his spear now. So the Black Series figure of Paploo comes with one separate accessory, because of course that knife does not come out of the sheath or is removable from the belt. Looking into this item up close, it is made in two sections. There is a join here, which is a little unusual. This isn't necessarily that long for an accessory for this range, so I was expecting it to be made out of one piece, though I suppose in world this is one long stick with a two-pronged end that's reinforced with a bit of leather wrapping, and it looks like kind of the hide of an animal sort of wrapped around this midsection, though if you compare it up really close to Paploo himself, it does actually look the same in terms of the same texture, and even has a little bit of that sort of accent color as well. So it kind of has the appearance of being Ewok fur, though I guess we're just going to assume it is another similar furred animal that they have killed and used the hide of for their weapons. So I'm hoping that this is quite sturdy and is going to hold in both hands well. I'm going to test out just holding it in one hand. I'm hoping these 3 fingers are going to hold on to the sort of stick section nice and easily, because they are quite short, but you can see there he holds the staff quite nicely, and it is quite high. It kind of adds a lot more height to this cute little Ewok there, so that's looking quite good. So I'm hoping that we can get a little bit of hand rotation, and I'll see if I can get these fingers to kind of just gonna have to press a little bit. His hands are quite, oh, there we go. Okay, so going to tweak on that one a little bit. Got to tweak the positioning just so that I'm not bending through that join there, but he can hold it. Took a little bit of pressing in that left hand to kind of really get that through those fingers there, because of course normal sort of humanoid Black Series figures, they have a specific grip for holding lightsabers and staff weapons. The Ewok fingers are very different, but they can still hold the staff weapon quite well. So that is really good, and he's holding it and standing up well, which I am quite relieved about. I was a little bit worried, considering how wobbly he was, getting him out of the bubble, that I was going to have a little bit of difficulty getting him to stand up straight, especially adding a weapon in the front can tip them forward a lot of the time. But this looks really cool. I'm going to have a bit of fun playing with the different poses. I think I like them holding it just with one hand, kind of like a spear or a bit of a walking stick staff type position, but I'm glad to know that they can hold it in 2 hands, so that's really cool. Okay, so of course these are very short compared to standard Black Series figures, so let's grab a Stormtrooper and do a little bit of a side-by-side height comparison between the 2 figures. Doing a quick height comparison here, he is just under 4 inches tall, or of course that is a little under 10 centimeters tall. Both measurements are not including that feather. He does cheat a little bit there, adding a little bit of height on the top there, and as you can see, he's quite a good height next to a Stormtrooper there. Now seeing these 2 side by side really makes me want more Black Series 6-inch scale Ewoks for my collection. I really want to have a whole little tribe of Ewoks, and I'm especially annoyed that I don't have Wicket. I'm definitely going to try and track that one down. He was quickly off the shelf here in New Zealand. I'm a little bit annoyed because he's just so much fun. I wasn't sure how much I was going to like the Ewoks in the Black Series line. Sometimes the articulation on these shorter figures can be a little bit clunky and sort of chop up the sculpting, and sort of the faux fur effect of the plastic doesn't always translate quite well. But I do really like this figure. I did wait until he was over a year old and on clearance, but now that I finally have him out of the packaging, I really quite like it. It does live up to my expectations, and I was really quite surprised with how well I can actually articulate him. And he does look pretty cute. I was worried that sometimes the characters like Chewbacca, the ones with the faux fur, just don't look right when you put them into certain plastic formats. Sometimes they just kind of give you a little bit of they just look a little odd, and I was worried that the Ewoks in this scale, because of course the vintage ones were much more sort of almost one piece. They almost had no articulation, very, very simple articulation, sort of the arms and the legs. So you kind of got a smoother all over effect. Because of the high level of articulation in the modern action figure lines, I was worried it was going to be chopped up and just kind of look a little bit robotic, but he looks cute and I really like the details. I'm really happy with this one. It was just really different. My first Ewok Black Series figure to sort of open and look at the articulation. So now that I have this one, I'm definitely going to be wanting to add more to my Black Series collection. So this was a lot of fun, and I think he looks cute, ready to take on the Empire. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars Black Series figure and had just so much fun checking out all of the details. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Black Series fan, I recently opened up the Emperor Palpatine archive figure. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Black Series unboxing playlist. This is the way.